Well, hi everyone, this is Art Lembo again, and we're going to continue moving through our series in analyzing COVID-19 data with SQLite. Now, what we're going to do though is we're going to look at the spatial considerations for SQL with the spatio-temporal visualizations, but this time we're going to focus on counties. In our last video, we looked at states. And look, if you are just jumping into the videos now, we've moved along quite a bit. You might want to consider clicking on the link in my description down below so you can start from the beginning, you can get your data, and you can also begin to build up to the level that we're at now. So in our last video, we had a lot of fun looking at the statewide distribution of deaths and hospitalizations and cases throughout the United States and how that changed over time. Well, we're going to do that again, but we're going to ratchet it up a little bit and begin to look at countywide data. Because the countywide data is going to give us a little more spatial granularity so that we realize that all states aren't created equal. New York had different outbreaks throughout the state, as did Florida. So this is the code we just looked at before, where we looked at the weekly averages, but we did it based upon the state data and the daily information. Now we're going to change things. We're going to look at this query and we're going to deal with the county data and the COVID county data. So let's just look at that county COVID data again. Oops, excuse me, COVID county. We'll type that in and we'll run that. And here what you can see is we've got the county name, the state name, and then the number of cases and deaths for a particular date. And we have a new field called new deaths. So when we increase our deaths, we show the new deaths that have occurred for that particular day. And you'll notice here the FIPS data is for this county here, Autauga, 01001, right? So it's the first state and then the first county in that state. Let's look at the data for the geometry. There we go. Let's order it by state, FP, and county, FP. All right, so that way we can just kind of see how things are working out. All right, so here we go. Again, here's Autauga County, and you can see we've got the geometries in there. So that's how we made our maps. We did the same thing with states. But look here. Now I don't have one long FIPS code. I have a state FIP code, 01, right? So that's for Alabama. And then I have the county, 001. So 01001 is Autauga County, but we don't have it set up that way. So we're going to have to play a little game so that we can join these county geometries with the COVID county data. So this is the query we used in the last video that we looked at, and we were looking at the states and the daily occurrences and where the state is equal to the United States Postal Service abbreviation for the state. So we were able to join them together, and if you remember, we grabbed the week as an integer for each of the cases that occurred that day, and then we did a group by the week and the geometry, so we were able to join it by the state. And we also summed up the increases in positive cases, increases in deaths, and increases in hospitalizations, and we could visualize that. And then of course we recovered that geometry column to register the data, and I guess we'll start from the beginning here. We dropped the table, spatial table if it existed, then we created a new table as this select statement, right? So we're going to do the same thing now, but we're doing it with the county. So again, we're dropping, actually let's take this data here, we'll copy it and we'll put it into SQLite or Spatial-lite, and let's make it a little smaller so we can read it better. There we go. So again, same game as before, drop the table if it exists. Let's create the table as a select statement. When that select statement is completed, we're going to recover the geometry column so that way it's registered and QGIS can read it. So what are we doing here? We're grabbing the week from the date field as an integer. We're getting the minimum date for that week, so that just gives us kind of a placeholder for the week. We're getting the geometry, we're getting the minimum value for the state and the minimum value for the county, and we're going to sum the new deaths. And here I'm casting that as an integer because remember from early on in our videos, the data that we got from the COVID-19 tracking project, the deaths came as text values. So I just want to make sure that we've got that clear here. So we're going to cast that as an integer to get our new deaths. And here's the key. Where the state FP, here you can see the O1, with these two pipes. So I'm basically ramming these two fields together. State and county FPs. So that's going to be O1001 is what gets returned here, where it equals the FIPS code. Well, that FIPS code was 01001 for that particular county. That's the one that comes from the county, the COVID county data that includes the cases and the deaths from the COVID-19 project. Then I'm going to group it by the week, right? So the first week of the year, second week of the year, third week of the year, of course. And I'm going to then order it by the actual date. And again, we're grabbing the date, the minimum date for that particular week. Right? So we've got a bunch of dates that occurred in that week, but I'm going to grab the minimum one. And of course, we register the column. And we'll let this run. And you'll see this takes a little bit longer because, again, we're not dealing with 50 records of the state. We're now dealing with about 3,200 records of all the counties. And that took about 6 seconds. Well, what we'll do now is bring in the spatial table, right? Because we created that. And let's add that. And again, that takes a little longer too because there's a lot of data. You can see that. And let's visualize that. So I'm going to click here on the styling pattern, and we'll look at a graduated color map, and let's look at new deaths. Right, so we didn't worry about cases here, and let's look at natural breaks, and we'll classify that. There we go. And you can see those colors pop up. So I've already got my time manager loaded. If you don't and forgot where to get that, you go to your plugins and then under time manager, and then you can toggle the visibility. So we'll go to our settings, and I'm going to add a layer. And in this case, our layer is the spatial table. Our start time is going to be the date, and we'll have our end time. That's fine as well. We'll leave all that, and then we'll hit OK. So now I'm going to look at 1 week at a time. So let's run this, and you can see the deaths that are occurring by county. Now notice how New York, the New York metro area, is getting pretty lit up, right? They were really in trouble early on, and then you see those numbers begin to go down as New York got control over things, and we start to see some increases down in the south. So now you can see Florida and the Sunbelt states are having a little bit more in terms of deaths that have occurred. And this is where we ended up on September 28th. So you can see we're having more deaths occurring in the south than in the north. But again, as we go back a ways, you can see what's happened back in April and in March, right? This is where things got really, really hot in the New York metropolitan area, and where people were really worried about what was going to eventually happen throughout the country. And again, you can see here, again, we get into late March, early April, right, and then move on. But again, we start to see, even New York had one color in our last video. Now you start to see, here's Erie County in New York, where Buffalo is, and Monroe County, and then here's the New York metro area that's in there as well. And again, for whatever reason, you noticed before, Long Island, Suffolk, and Nassau counties had what appeared to be just blank data. So for whatever reason, that particular week, it might have been recording errors that came in with the original data. But again, by looking at this data, you're beginning to see what has happened over time and space in the United States. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Also, consider subscribing to the channel so that way when new videos come out, you'll know right away and I can send it off to you. And finally, leave a comment down below. Let's hear about what the spatial and temporal spread of COVID-19 looks like in your county.